No, it can't be. This is so unfair. I cannot believe this is happening to me. When we remain stuck in this mental response, we will keep pushing ourselves into unnecessary frustration, anger, sadness, and hopelessness. In this video, you will learn where these responses come from, why we get stuck in them, what the different versions sound like, and how you can relate to them in a way that allows you to make peace with reality. Hey everyone, and welcome to Becoming an Expert at Self-Leadership. I'm Maika, a psychologist, and I've created this channel to share uplifting insights from psychology to help you empower yourself to do what's most important to you on the deepest level of your heart. And today I want to talk about control, how when we exaggerate our need for control, we make life more painful and harder than it needs to be. And I want to talk about a powerful way of balancing that through acceptance. I don't want to make this sound like a one-sided control bashing show though. So let me start out by saying that control is a basic human need. Where would we be if we weren't able to take action, design, influence, create, pursue, and achieve goals? What we have difficulties with is accepting the limits of our control. In an attempt to avoid pain and discomfort, we exaggerate our sphere of control in our mind. We create this mental illusion and a narrative that bends the truth and makes it seem like we have a lot more under control than we actually do, and then we hold on to that really tightly. This comes at a cost. Struggling against reality, fighting with what is, bending the truth or trying to, costs us a lot of energy, and it increases the amount of discomfort and unpleasant sensations and emotions that we experience. This is because in addition to the unavoidable suffering and pain, we are adding the needless suffering and pain of unnecessary anger, frustration, anxiety, or other uncomfortable emotions. It's one of life's most tricky paradoxes. The more we accept and embrace our limit to be in full control and to completely avoid suffering, the less pain and suffering we experience. I've talked about this before in another video in more detail, and I'll add the link to that in the description box and amongst the info cards at the right-hand side of this video. Another important point, the way psychology uses the term acceptance does not mean that we stop changing, that we approve of something, or that we stop interfering or being proactive in situations. Whether we decide to do something about something or not is just a completely different question. And no matter if we decide to do something or not, to process any situation and any emotion, we first need to accept it and find a response to it that is kind, mindful, and not mainly wrapped up in fighting against the truth of the situation. We can't really do something about anything anyhow if we've never really looked into its eyes and seen the truth of it and accepted that as the fundament and basis of what is. In the following, I want to discuss sentences we can hear ourselves saying out loud or thinking that come from this narrative of the mind that insists on control in a way that is harmful, or to an extent that is harmful. It's the narrative that tries to bend the truth and tries to force situations and others to be what we want them to be. And it's a narrative that expresses a fight with, resistance of, and struggle with reality. The more we are able to recognize and understand our narrative of struggle and resistance, the more we'll be able to choose acceptance over additional pain, discomfort, and suffering in more and more situations in our lives. This increases our resilience in the face of uncertainty, unplanned events, difficult emotions, and pain. Acceptance makes us playful, lighthearted, and more open to following and going with the flow of life and going through growth processes, even if they start with something that looks like a breakdown. Okay, let's start. Here are sentences that express the narrative of exaggerated control, an exaggerated attempt at control, and resistance of reality. Number 1, this is a bad way to feel. The foundation for our struggle with our emotional reality is when we're identified and fused with mental judgments that certain emotions like anger, fear, guilt, or sadness are inherently bad and need to be avoided at all costs. These judgments misunderstand the nature of life and emotions, because just because something is unpleasant doesn't mean it doesn't have a purpose. And when we are threatened by unpleasant emotions and sensations, we trigger our body's stress response, and in that way, we increase the amount of discomfort we experience in that situation. It's an expression of this exaggerated attempt at control, to think that we have a chance of having our emotions so under control that we will never experience an unpleasant emotion, and that is even something that is desirable. Number 2, it can't be. When we remain stuck in this sometimes natural initial response of it can't be, my goodness, it can't be, what we're actually saying is, I don't want it to be. It shouldn't be this way. This is unfair. I do not want to hear this. And in that way, we keep ourselves caught in frustration whenever things aren't the way we want them to be. And in that way, we close ourselves to processing situations and emotions. We close ourselves to change, learning, and growth, because all of that would require to stop rejecting reality, to stop being content with just complaining and resisting the truth. Will this resistance of the truth make it any less true? Number 3, why? There's nothing wrong with asking why something happened. That makes sense. It helps us learn from something and grow and process situations. But there comes a point when we need to make peace with the situation. And that is also the point when we need to stop asking why. But sometimes we don't want to stop asking why because that would mean we would have to admit to ourselves that we know everything there is to know and we did everything that we could have done. And now we've reached the limit of our control. And additional whys wouldn't have given us more scope to do more things. We'd rather pretend that we have more control than we actually have and fight the reality and keep on asking why, pretending that we just need more information. The problem is not that we don't have all the control. The problem is we don't have all the information. Variations of this question are, why did this happen to me? What did I do to deserve this? What's wrong with me? Again, I'm not saying we should never ask these questions in a kind form, but we can also ask them too often, too long, and repetitiously, and in that way remain stuck in this unsettled state of not finding closure with a situation. Because finding the closure would mean we need to accept that there was nothing more that we could have done because our control is limited. Number 4, I can't handle this. This thought also fuels our struggle with reality and fight for more control and influence. The thought that we're too weak, that we can't handle something or cope with a situation, and we need to make it go away as quickly as possible. And therefore, we need to exaggerate our sphere of influence and try to make this go away, even if it's not within our control at the moment. The truth is that we often have a negatively distorted view of how things will play out in ourselves. Like Mark Twain said, I've had many worries in my life, most of which never happened. We're also not that great at estimating how we will feel in the future, especially when something happens that challenges us. We underestimate our resilience and the power of our psychological immune system. Number 5, if only. Life would be so great if only I didn't have to take care of errands, earn money, or take care of my health. If only I didn't see a wrinkle and new gray hair every morning when I look into the mirror. When we get wrapped up in a characteristic of life like this, and that's the only thing we talk about, focus on, notice, and we overemphasize its importance and how much that is actually the cause of our suffering, this is another way that we get hung up on reality and struggle against it instead of accepting it. And we can demand for the control to be able to change that characteristic of life instead of seeing how we would have a lot less problems and discomfort if we just stop fighting with the truth. And sometimes, sure, we can notice things that bother us that we want to change. Every change starts like that, or most change does. That's not what I'm talking about here. This is about just getting hung up on things without accepting them and without ever intending to change what we can change. If you want to free yourself of the grip of this narrative that increases the suffering in your life and makes it harder than it needs to be, I suggest that you notice it more when these types of thoughts come up. And when they do, label them as what they are, thoughts. So you may be having the thought, this is so unfair. And instead of sticking with it and remaining stuck in that response, you could label it and think or say, I'm having the thought that this is so unfair. Or if you notice that you're thinking this emotion is unbearable, label it and call it what it is, a judgment, a thought. You can say to yourself, I am making the judgment that this emotion is unbearable. You can also say something like, thanks, mind, or thanks, but I'm not getting into this today, mind, and then focus on something valuable and constructive. This helps you to disidentify and break the fusion with these thoughts that push you towards struggle, resistance, and a fight with reality. And in that way, you can decrease the emotional suffering you experience. You can leave it at that. Defusion is already tremendously powerful in itself, especially if it's a recurring thought. It can be a resilient response to defuse from it and disidentify from it over and over and see how its power over your mind decreases. And if the situation seems to recommend it, you can also question this initial response of the mind and ask yourself, how helpful is it? And then find a different response that is more supportive. You can also voice your intention of accepting, saying something like, it is what it is. This is not what I wanted, but here I am. I don't have to like it. I don't have to approve of it, but I do want to stop fighting against it because that's a fight I can't win. To me, this is one of the open secrets of life. Open in the sense that it's accessible, and secret in the sense that it can seem so trivial. But if you take this topic seriously, you'll be amazed to see how it feeds your personal growth and positivity. All right. Till next time, take care. I upload every week, and if you don't want to miss anything, remember to subscribe and hit the notification bell so that you can make sure to really have my videos be recommended to you. And remember to notice your narrative of struggle and to defuse from it